All right. Hey, everybody. I am Brandon Wells, the new assistant program lead for Roanoke Salem chapter of Project Healing Waters. Tonight we are tying the CK Nymph, tied by a amazing and legendary Charles Craft. It is meant to imitate a black stonefly. We tie it in sizes all the way from 12 and up, depending on the size of the species in your waters. We're going to be tying it tonight with some black dubbing, some lead wire, some dry fly grizzly hackle, which will trim down to size. The tail will be either mallard flank or some antron, Zelon type material, and I believe tonight is a 14 hook, wet fly hook. And so we're joined tonight by a few of our participants and volunteers, and their respective videos are on. And we're happy you've joined us if it's after the fact, and we're really happy you've joined us if it's live. I am going to switch cameras now to my GoPro, which has a macro lens on it, on the hook, and we'll get a nice zoomed in image of that hook as I work on it. All right, hopefully you can see that now as a spotlighted image. And I've started my thread on the hook there at the eye. I'm working with 6/0 or 36 denier black thread behind the eye and ran it back. Looks like Matt has just joined. Matt, welcome. Big shout out to Kathy for sending these materials last minute. We wanted to feature a fly that was hot right now in the Roanoke Salem Valley. Quite a few places most likely are feeling this fly right now, as it's kind of a winter stone. But when at our last meeting, Bob Crawshaw and a few others were kind of singing its praises. So we said, hey, let's scratch the Griffith's gnat, which we were going to tie next meeting, and we kind of did a emergency drop ship from our amazing program lead Kathy, and she got all the materials out to those that participate in our fly tying for the CK Nymph. So huge thank you to Kathy for doing that last minute supply drop, and I've got everything I need here in front of me now to tie the CK Nymph. I have started the thread. I'm going to run a good base all the way down the shaft of this hook to the bend, and then I'm going to stop. So get a good thread base there. We're going to lay down some dubbing on top shortly, but you want that nice black underbody in case you leave a thin spot with the dubbing. And we're going to tie in our tail here right at the bend. I'm going to use the wood duck, the mallard flank, dyed an amber color first as my tail. I'm going to pinch off a nice, I don't know, 5 or 6 barbs there. And I will use those as the tail hanging off the end of this fly. The CK Nymph can either roll weighted or unweighted. I might throw some lead on this one here as I move forward on the shank, but you can tie it either way. There's different kind of preferences depending on how you fish it. I might throw a few wraps of lead on this as I move forward just to get it down in the water column. Winter time, the fish are slower, they're a little sluggish, they're on the bottom most likely where the current is the slowest. So you might want to tie that heavier fly to get the fly down to where the fish are hanging out, hoping for that easy meal. I'm going to measure my tail there to be a hook shank length. I'm going to transfer hands, and I'm going to put it right at the tie-in point, and I'm going to lock that down with 2 or 3 good wraps of thread to get that tail hanging off the rear end of my hook shank. If you feel like your length is a little long, now's your chance to adjust. If you've done 2 or 3 good wraps, that mallard flank will slide right through those wraps pretty easy, and you can adjust the length of your tail at that point. If you find your mallard flank is tending to roll, my tip to you is to lift it straight up. So if you lift it straight up, you can get some really good center line wraps on it over the hook shank and center everything real clean so that you have a tail that goes right off the back of the shank there. And I'm going to clear off my excess. And leave your thread hanging right there at the base. We will tie in a few more materials there, and we will make sure that we have a clean spot to tie in both dubbing and hackle as we move forward. I've muted the audience just for ease of use, as the speaker is spotlighted as we go forward. If you do want to talk, you're welcome to do so. Just unmute yourself and we'll go from there. All right. Try to scoot behind here so you can see the tail hanging off there. The next item we're going to tie in is our grizzly hackle. Luckily for this fly, you can tie in grizzly hackle that is specifically for a dry fly. Some of this high quality stuff, real small barbs, kind of hard to come by if you're new to tying those really high quality grizzly hackles. If you only have hackle that looks like this, that's fine too. Take it to the end there where you have the thinnest portion. And the great part about this fly is we actually trim the hackle to length of the hook gap. So the hook gap is the space between the point and the shank. So from here to here. And so if your hackle that you're using is longer than that, let's say you have some just massive hackle, we're going to trim it regardless. So you don't really have to worry about perfect dry fly hackle for this fly. Luckily, Kathy sent me some, and I'm very grateful. But even if you have longer hackle, we're going to trim it to get those really stiff barbs to stick up, look like legs and such. So don't worry about the length of your hackle for this fly. I'm going to tie in my hackle at this point. I'm going to strip off a little bit there to get a pretty barren quill. Lay that right on top of the hook shank facing me on the closer side of the shank. Tie that in, and I'm going to let it hang right off the back there for later. If you're the type that wants to throw some lead on, now would be a pretty good time to do that before we forget. So I'm going to take 2 or 3 inches of lead wire, and I'll probably wrap 3 or 4 lengths here, 3 or 4 wraps, just enough to give it a little bit of downward motion when it hits the water column. Get your wire cutting scissors if you have such a thing. You don't want to use your good scissors for this lead grunt work. Once you have those 4 or 5 wraps, just tighten them up there. We'll cover them with thread, and then we'll cover them with the dubbing or the floss. If you're choosing to use floss for this fly, we'll cover those right up. So at this point, you've got your hackle hanging off the bend. You've got your tail hanging off the bend. And now we're gonna tie in, for me, I'm gonna start with some dubbing. Kathy sent some very nice black dubbing, and we're gonna dub that onto our thread. If you have dubbing wax, great time to use it. I do. It is world's finest, allegedly, according to Jerry here. And I'm going to dub the thread there, and then I'll throw a little bit on the index finger to get a nice tight dubbing noodle onto the thread. You want it sparse so that you cannot build up too much. And that dubbing wax is going to help all that fibers stick to the thread. See that? Super helpful to have dubbing that actually wants to stick on your thread. I'm going to dub that on now. Spin it around real good. That lead is still sitting just fine. We're going to cover it up. So don't sweat that lead as it sits there. We're going to wrap dubbing over it. We're going to wrap thread over it. It's going to be secure. If you find your dubbing to be a little thicker than you'd like, pull from the bottom. So I definitely bit off more dubbing than I should chew, figuratively. So I pull from the bottom, and then what's left, I just work down until I find myself with a dubbing noodle that is acceptable for this fly. Charlie Stamper, Kathy. Another pro dubbing tip: choose counterclockwise or clockwise to your roll, to your finger roll, and stick with it. Never go both clockwise and counterclockwise. So stick with clockwise if you're a clockwise type, and never ever go both directions with your fingers. Simply pick one and stick with it, because that will get you the tightest dubbing noodle possible. If you're the type to rub back and forth, left and right, left and right, left and right, you're going to have a very loose dubbing noodle, and that's going to lead to dubbing that falls apart and does not stick to your shank as you'd like it to, doesn't hold up in the long run, etc., etc. I'm going to start wrapping this dubbing forward. As I work forward, I'm covering up that lead. If you find yourself short on dubbing, add a little bit more, and we're going to work forward. The great thing about this fly is if you find that you're kicking rocks and you're fishing and you might be seine in the water, whatever you're doing to find out what's biting, you can change the color of this fly so easily with a different dubbing color. It is, and I might tie two tonight just to demonstrate, but it's so easy to change this under color here for the dubbing and get a completely different stonefly pattern. Or if you notice they're just lighter, like after this fly, I'm going to use this kind of dark brown Antron, which is really cool stuff. It ties in like a chenille, but it lays real flat. And I'm looking forward to using it because you can get that black stone, or you can get kind of a more dark brown stone real quick, real easy, just by changing this one ingredient. All right, once your dubbing or whatever you're using is wrapped forward, I'm going to throw a quick whip finish in there because, well, insurance. And so I'm going to be fancy tonight and use the old finger method because all the cool kids are doing it. All right, with that whip finish now, I have a nice insurance policy in the event I screw up my hackle wraps. I can always kind of untie back to this point, and I know we're good up to this point. I'll let everybody catch up if they're trying to catch up to where I'm at right now. All right, I'm going to start wrapping forward with my hackle. You're just going to wrap forward with sweet baby, sweet, sweet baby. All right, we're heading backwards to tie in the old hackle again because life just occurred. And now I have to scramble. I got a little overzealous with the yank on the hackle there. And we'll run that thread back forward. Whew. All right, where were we? Kathy, we'll cut that out in post, right? As they say. Jeez Louise. All right, hackle, come on. We're gonna be friends here. All right, I'm running that hackle forward with pretty wide spacing here. We're not doing touching turns. We're doing pretty wide spacing. And as I get to the eye of the hook, I'm gonna finish off and capture that hackle with a few tight wraps. Good. When you have those few tight wraps, you're able to click off your excess dry fly hackle. There's a few schools of thought on the orientation of the hackle. As you can see with my hackle, it's kind of facing forward a bit. Why? So for this fly, I want the hackle to face forward because I don't want the hackle to lay down when it hits the water. Some of your woolly buggers and your flies that have that streamlined look, you wrap the hackle so that it orients backwards and it's leaning backwards so that when it gets wet, it hits the current, it lays flat against the body and gives you that real torpedo look. If you wrap the hackle so that it's laying forward, angled forward, it has a better chance of standing up and looking leggy and giving us that buggy look that we want to have from our stonefly nymph here, CK Nymph. So experiment with how you tie in the hackle. As you wrap forward, you'll notice that the barbs kind of want to point towards the eye or away from the eye, and adjust that depending on what fly you're tying. Again, with this fly, I orient the hackle forward towards the eye so that they don't lay down as easy and give that buggy look that we're going for with this fly. Final step here is a whip finish, a little head. Don't be afraid to throw a head on this thing to give it that bug nymph head look. A few kind of pronounced wraps here will give you the look of a nymph. They do have a very pronounced head on them, so don't hold back here. If you do capture some hackle, that's fine. We'll trim it out when we finish this fly, but try to give a pretty pronounced head to show that this bug does in fact have a front and a back. Five wraps for me on the whip, and then 3 because that's just what I do. And your fly has finished. If you did capture hackle, like you can see I did there, just give them a trim. I've seen some people hold a lighter to the eye of the fly hook at this point. I don't recommend that. But that is your buggy CK. Now, that final step that I mentioned was we were going to trim the hackle to kind of give us a length of the hook gap. So we want to trim off those wispy ends of our hackle to make our hackle as coarse and water resistant as possible. Not like a dry fly. This isn't typically fished as a dry. It's typically subsurface. We want those wispy barbs out of there, the tips gone, so you get a real bushy, and rigid barb there. So about the length of your hook gap, and you're in business. And that is the CK Nymph, weighted with a mallard flank tail. I will open it up to chat if you're willing. Otherwise, I'm going to tie another variation. The second variation is going to have an antron tail, much like this material. And it's going to have a antron body, much like this material, in a brown, as I don't have black.
Hey, Brandon, cool. I got a quick question.
Hit me.
Well, if you want this weighted, why don't we, and you want a prominent head on it, why don't we put like a black bead on the head?
You know what, Rosie? Do it.
You can.
You not to.
I do.
Do it.
Do, Bob?
Bob Crawshaw does it.
Okay.
I just don't tell anybody.
And that's how he catches fish. It's these secrets of the Crawshaw. That should be a title of your book, sir, that you're working on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Secrets of the Crawshaw.
And other fairy tales.
Read it.
Are you working on a book, Bob?
No.
No?
No, there's a million fly fishing books out there. And each one makes maybe 10 cents.
We don't need another, huh?
What's 10 times a million?
Yeah. What Brandon is getting ready for the next fly. You can tie this in yellow dubbing, and it's a good imitation of a yellow Sally stone that pops in late April. This particular pattern is, for me, like pheasant tail nymph, prince nymphs. It's a good searching pattern all year. However, in these months, in the winter, it's particularly effective because the large winter stone and the small winter stone nymphs are very, very active. They're about to hatch. When the eggs are laid, they burrow a meter below the base of the river, a meter down, and they slowly come up, and now they're active in the faster water. And there's 153 species of the small winter stone, and they're very sensitive to pollution. And I saw a hatch of them on the Roanoke River the other day.
Wow.
There's 35 species of the large winter stone, and they're a little less sensitive to pollution. But when you fish this fly, as Mark knows, you have to get it deep. If you're fishing it as a winter stonefly, you have to bounce it off the bottom because they live in the fast water. They're what they call lotic erosional habitats, which is moving water. They have to have moving water. And guess what they eat? They're detritivores, and they eat leaves. And it's the fall, and the river is full of leaves.
Is that the root?
They eat a ton of leaves. They eat 30% of their body weight in old leaves.
Wow.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Is it a good tandem fly?
Is it a what?
Is it a good tandem fly?
That's the only way I fish it. I fish it on my point, and above it, a heavy weighted beadhead fly.
Okay, thanks.
All right, we're going to weight this one down then, sir.
Yep. The other point I make is when you want to weight and make an unweighted fly, use gray thread. So when you look in your fly box, you can tell what's weighted and what's not weighted.
Oh.
Brilliant.
I mean, I'm still wondering, I mean, maybe this sounds like a dumb question, but like, is there such a thing as a fly being too weighted? Because what's the scenario where you wouldn't want, I mean, I get in faster water, if you're trying to get down deep, you definitely need the weight, but why would you ever want a nymph or a wet fly that wasn't weighted in some form or another? That's what I can't quite understand.
Okay, well, the soft hackles aren't weighted, and they imitate rising insects.
Okay, all right.
Insects that are up in the water column. There are in the slower water, you won't find stoneflies or caddisflies.
Okay.
So, fishing fast water, stoneflies and caddisflies are absolutely dead on the bottom. And so you have to have it weighted in fast water. In slower water, a heavy hook will get it down in real slow water.
Right.
I don't know if that helps. But
All right, now Brandon, what'd you do?
That was a good question. Not a bad question.
I think, Mark, you're going to start flirting with a bug that doesn't move naturally, right? So if that thing just plummets to the bottom and it doesn't quite drift as a bug would, you might have fish that are like, that's odd.
What's that?
if it just a 1 pound fly, I think you might have a situation where that weight becomes an issue.
Okay.
It's creating its own drag of sorts. So you want it down, but not causing drag unnecessarily, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
good point, Brandon.
Are you using this white stuff instead of the mallard flank?
That's exactly what's happening right now. Yeah. So there's a better view, hopefully. I've tied in this tail instead of the mallard flank. This is Antron, and it's pretty cool stuff. It has some good rigidity, but it gives that kind of translucent tail impression, which is nice too. All right, from here, we're going to once again tie in the hackle. I'll tie in something a little bigger just to demonstrate that, yeah, this hackle is, cheap and probably easy to come by and available at every single big box sporting goods store. But for this fly, it's perfectly acceptable because we're trimming so much of it off. And again, to talk about the orientation of the hackle after it's tied in, after you begin wrapping forward, I really like to angle it towards the eye of the hook to ensure that it stands up when it's subjected to the water. I'm going to run my thread back again all the way to the tie-in point, which is right there at the bend. And I will tie in my floss. As I said, we're going to weight this one pretty good. So I'm going to get the lead slice out here that Kathy included, and we'll do 6 wraps. Six good wraps, and we'll lock that down with some wraps of thread as we move forward, and then we'll tie in the Antron that I mentioned earlier. In this case, it's going to be brown. I'm gonna try to organize my wraps here just to get them easier to tie in. That looks pretty good. I've got you all muted now, so if you need to say something, don't forget to unmute, because I'm trying to keep my video highlighted on the screen to help with posting it later. A few wraps there to lock the lead in. We'll also, of course, have wraps of the Antron to help lock that lead in. And back to the bend again for my yarn. We'll pull off about 6 inches of that, tie it in right there, and work it forward.
Hey, Brandon, I'm sorry. Is that what you're tying in right now? Is that what you also use for the tail? Or no, wait, that's brown.
same type material, but color change.
Can we use the white or whatever that we have, or?
I don't think I'd use a white body, Mark, just because this stone is typically a darker color in the winter. If you have yarn of any kind, perfectly acceptable to use. If you have chenille that looks something like this, you may be able to get away with that, depending on the relative girth of your chenille. No rules, Mark. None. Not one rule here.
Got some.
Fantastic.
All right. So I'm sorry. So like this.
Yeah, that looks great.
And so just okay. All right. So just you tied that in at the back, and
yep, right there at the bend. Everybody's hanging off the bend right now, and I'll run the thread forward.
Place to be.
Yep, at the bend. I'll see you at the bend. All right, I'm gonna start wrapping that yarn forward now. Antron, whatever you want to call it. We're gonna build up a nice profile here as we move forward. This Antron, again, is super cool because it lays flat and smooth, and you can build it up where you need it to kind of level out any areas that, in this case, I had lead. You can really hone that shape of the bug as you go forward into that classic just Cuban cigar. A few wraps there, and I'll trim off the excess. Good time to tie a whip finish if you're into that, which I am. Before the hackle starts. And now what you've got hanging off the back is your grizzly hackle that we're going to start bringing forward. If you wrap away, the hackles will angle towards the front. And we will have, in my case right now, big old massive hackles that will trim down here shortly and get them under control. definitely trapped some there, as you can see them trying to head off towards the hook eye. So I'm going to pull up on those pretty firm and get a good trim there. It's inevitable with massive hackle like that. If you do see hackle that has become trapped by subsequent wraps, for example, right about there, you can see that hackle's trapped. Just grab your dubbing needle and try to get it under the hackle and free it, lift it up. With hackle that long, you're going to inevitably have some that get where they don't belong. And before I go any further, I'm going to finish this fly off with a whip. I've got a pretty good head there already because the quill on that larger hackle is bigger. So I don't have to worry about building up as much of a head on this fly. Monstrous and buggy. We're gonna trim it down now to the hook gap length. Give or take. So now you get to be a barber and kind of give this thing a high and tight. And that's it. CK Nymph.
When in 1986, I was stumbling along a small creek near Wintergreen, and stumbled into a fly shop. And guess who was sitting there tying this fly? Charles Kraft,
The man himself.
man himself. And we were skeptical. But when he trimmed this fly, he trimmed the entire bottom of the hackle,
Really?
right down to the dubbin. And then he did something that was remarkable. I don't know if you can see this, but you notice how the feathers stick out towards the eye, and you have to trim them off, and it gets a little ugly.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and do this where you can see it. I put a piece of tubing on my bobbin,
Okay.
and or I slice it so that it slips right off. And then when I'm done with the fly and I have all those feathers sticking out, I simply slide this up the thread over the hook, and it lays down all the feathers, so I can whip finish the fly without getting you understand what I'm saying?
I like it.
Yeah, it's shrink tubing, and I get it in different sizes. I guess it's not going to show, but I get it in different sizes. Like I get really fat and not so fat like me, and really skinny. So I can use it for size 18 dry flies, and I get those fibers from the feather off of the eye, so I can whip finish it without trapping feathers.
Brilliant.
And you can get a whole pack of this stuff at Lowe's of different
Sure.
sizes, and then I usually slice it in half. Sometimes I just snap it onto the top of the hook after I'm done, but other times I put it on the bottom.
It's a great
That's my
idea.
2 cents.
Thank you. That's a good tip, sir. Thank you. Charlie, thanks
Yeah.
for coming in. I don't feel like I acknowledged you, but we appreciate your attendance, sir. Anybody have anything for the good of the group?
I'd say
Oh, great job. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, Brandon,
Yeah,
thanks. This is our last meeting of 2020.
indeed.
And we thank you for everything you've done for leading us this year. It's been fantastic. And Mark actually has a little bit of something he wants to say.
All right. Do I have the floor or
You
the
have the
computer? I have it.
All right.
Yeah, like just like Kathy said, Brandon, I mean, I'm sure I'm speaking for just about everybody when we say we couldn't appreciate enough you doing this, because it's obviously, it takes a lot, not just doing it where you're doing it, but you have to prep for it. You have all, and it's a commitment that you have to do, and not just once a month, but every 2 weeks. And I myself have caught several fish on the flies that you have, tied for us. But I mean, it's just been a great thing, and it's a nice thing to be able to count on you to do. And we wanted to show you that we appreciated that. And by doing that, a couple of us got together and we got you a little something. It's sort of like a thank you or an appreciation, but it's also kind of like a Christmas present. So this is a fly tester, and I'm sure you know what this is.
I've heard.
But this is, if you guys that are online, if you Google it, I mean, if you just Google like fly tester, what it is it's basically a tub in a sense that has a little water pump attached to it. And so you can hook your flies into it and actually test your flies to see how they swim in the water.
Wow.
And, you can see if it's got the movement that you're looking for, or if it's not anywhere close to what you're looking for. But it's really nice. Got a carrying case. It's got, it's got all kinds of gadgets in here and everything in it. So
Oh my gosh,
I'll get this over to you. But we just a couple of us got together. We wanted to show you that we appreciated, everything that you've done. And that's I'm not a very good speaker, so that's pretty much it.
No, that was good, Mark. Thank you. I appreciate it. That's amazing. More than you needed to do, for sure. This program has already given me more than I can ever repay. This is a small measure of a way that I'm able to repay Healing Waters. So thank you to whoever was involved. That's awesome. I will put it into use the very next time we tie.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I was like, that'd be neat for you. I mean, obviously you don't have to, but that would be neat. Maybe every meeting here and every now and then to maybe show us whatever the flies that we tied last time, actually, show them in action of like,
Absolutely.
And it'd be probably even better to see the fails, of like, okay, this does not swim well at all.
Right. This dry fly sank after 3 seconds. Something's wrong. No, consider it a new feature. I personally, Mark, I 100% agree with you. They look great here, ice, but underwater is where it counts. So let's integrate that. That's a really cool feature, and I'm just gonna have to get another camera to go to the test tank. So that's awesome. Thank you.
The only problem is our next fly is the Griffith's gnat.
It's a dry.
Will it go in that little, can you
It'll
show
float.
it in that thing?
Yeah, it'll float.
Okay.
We'll put it in. I'll figure it out.
See
But
how
yeah,
it works.
that's awesome. I will put it here in the fly tying station, and we'll use that for what it's worth. Thank you. That's cool.
And Brandon, was it maybe two weekends ago where we had the Virginia fly tying marathon, and you tied flies and Kyle did, and then one of the fellas from Charlottesville. That was a 4-hour thing.
Yeah, they had a marathon session. Charlottesville hosted, but corporate kind of got a hold of it, and it was a good idea. It was very well executed. Bill Campbell kind of chaired it and made sure it went off without a hitch. But it was a neat interaction with vets as they came and went through the 4-hour session. I tied the soft tackle that we tied last meeting, but it was a cool way to try to reach as many vets as possible throughout the end of the day there on a Friday. So it's a good idea.
It's great. Yep. Well, gosh, I guess we meet next time in January.
Yep. 2021 is gonna be better.
It can't
Great
get any
job,
worse.
Brandon.
That's right. It
Yep.
can't get worse. Thank
Great
you, sir.
job, man.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Brandon.
Thanks, Brandon.
All right, y'all take
See you
care.
next year.
Merry
Merry
Christmas,
Christmas, everybody.